Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 5 questions in about 10 minutes. And I'm very excited to welcome our guest today. This is Melanie Bell. She is the co-founder of Strategic Peace and also the organizer of Leaders Who Fiction. And she's out of Houston, Texas. Melanie, thank you so much for joining me today. Tell the audience a little bit more, especially about Leaders Who Fiction. I think this is a fascinating idea. I'd like you to share a little bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sean. I really appreciate it. And so Leaders Who Fiction is a group that I started earlier this year, and we're in 2022, so early in 2022. And it is essentially an online book club for people who want to work on developing or refining their leadership skills, specifically through reading novels. So we get together once a month, have an online fun Zoom call, and talk about a book either I've picked or a different member has selected. I get veto power. But it's been really amazing to see that community come together, and it's still kind of nascent, but some fun stuff that's happened so far and positive results with that.
Oh, that's great. I love the concept. And so I wish you every success with that, because I think that's a great way to teach some leadership principles coming from books, especially fiction. So I like that. Thank you. All right, well, let's get to our questions for our episode. Our first question, Melanie, I'm sure this has never happened to you, but occasionally there are employees or workers or C-suite individuals who maybe have a little bit of a conflict with a coworker, or maybe they're a leader and having to navigate that with coworkers. What's one suggestion that you have on how people can resolve conflict? And if you have a story you'd like to share, feel free.
Sure. So I actually run Strategic Peace with my husband. So we have the wonderful privilege of working together, which we started working together right before COVID. So we went from, I'd worked on my own and he had a day job. And then in late 2019, we joined forces. And then 2020 lockdown happened. So I went from he's out of the house all day to now you're around all day, and now nobody else is ever around. And so it was, I mean, for everyone, fairly stressful times. But for us last year, we went through quite a big, we were trying to make the decision as to how what we wanted to do with the business. Did we want to grow it? Did we want more of a lifestyle business? And so I'm not going to say, well, there were days we didn't get along. That's probably putting it nicely. And clearly not any of my fault.
Of course
Only on the
not.
other
Never,
party,
never.
obviously. But we did it. I think we've ended up in a much better place than we were, and work better because we actually went through this pretty stressful time period, which was tense. We both wanted to take things in a slightly different direction. And so the way we handled that was creating the space and the time to talk, and then do a lot of listening, and really hear the other person out, and not try to fix everything in one conversation. I think that was the other great thing, was we knew it was something like that. It takes time. And I think, maybe it's not a tough decision that you're making. Maybe it is a personality conflict, but I think when you can acknowledge it and both parties try to work on it with that space to talk about it and be honest and listen, I think I don't see another way out other than acknowledging it.
Well, and just kind of, as you said, just addressing it head on and talking about it. That's just a great option. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go on to question number 2. I'm sure you've heard the phrase that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. What's one suggestion that you have for leaders to help them retain their talent a little bit longer?
Sure. So I think for me, at least when I've been in a leadership position before, the first thing that I did where I went wrong with this was hiring the wrong people. And so it first of all was the right thing for them to move on. And so if you want people to stick around, you have to first of all hire the right people that you want to stick around.
Good
And then
point.
if you accomplish that, that's a huge part of the battle, won. And then to keep them, I think this has been an interesting thing to watch over the last few years, is that we have more and more acknowledgement of people showing up to work as full humans. We're not just 9 to 5 and in the, how productive or what problem solving thing can we do and how do we add value to a business, but people are parents and spouses and need to work on their health and all of these things. And so to me, leaders and good manager keeps witnessing and acknowledging the human that's on the other side of the table from them or on the other side of a Zoom call, and really works. I don't know. I love the term servant leadership. I'm not convinced everyone can adopt that as a leadership style, but I think if you can just keep working to acknowledge that human, then that's a huge part of
I
it.
really like that. Yeah, that recognizing that humanness, that we all interact with each other on a human level, not just employer, employee, leader, follower, whatever designations you want there. But great comments. Thank you.
Great.
Question number 3, what is one suggestion that you have for how a team can build resilience, or how the leader can help the team build resilience?
To me, this starts with the leader, him or her or their self. And it's I think really good leaders will continue to work on what they need to develop in themselves. And then it makes it okay for everybody else around them to work on their weaknesses, acknowledge them. You can have a team support with that. And so I think for leaders that want to be have more resilient teams, work on your resilience skills and illustrate what that looks like. Because we say it's I've had this conversation with a lot of people, which is like, you can't hold someone to a higher standard than you're willing to hold yourself. But I also believe you can't hold someone to a higher standard than they want to hold for themselves.
Very true. Yeah.
And so I think showing where you think that standard should be and normalizing it and showing the work and the effort that it takes to do that, I think that's how you'll end up with a more resilient group.
Great ideas. Thank you. Question number 4, is there someone that you would like to recognize that has had a positive influence in your life?
Maybe like 1,000 people.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
It
Narrowing it
is.
down.
It's really hard. One recent one that comes to mind, I had to have surgery earlier this summer. And knew it was coming. It was scheduled for about 6 weeks out, and the recovery time from that was going to be quite long. So like full recovery is about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And and so while the surgery wasn't risky or something like that, it wasn't like a brain surgery, but it was still quite a bit of time and effort. And I think I wasn't acknowledging how nervous I was about it. And then it showed up in a work meeting that I had with a client and a friend. I was very much raised in a school of thought of like, don't show emotion at work. And I think this is the second time in my life I've cried at work, just like almost randomly on a phone call. And I felt really embarrassed about that afterwards. And the person on the other end of the line just listened and acknowledged it, and in the moment. And then I went off and had surgery, and then I was like coming back and I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm, I think especially for women, it's like you don't want to be judged as some really crazy emotional person, and you feel like there's that risk that's how someone's gonna look at it. And it was like I brought it up very briefly, and it was just like, yeah, no big deal, we're moving on. And so I think for me, that was like one of the kindest things that someone could have done, was just give me that space and grace to like have a really off
day
reaction to something, and then forget about it and not have judgment with that. So
wow, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it, because sometimes we all have those moments where it's just a little dip. It's not something
we're
that
human.
it doesn't need to define us. But I definitely understand. And although I'm not a woman, so I'm not sure if that's how most of you respond that way, but I know I respond that way. And so you don't want people to see sometimes those little human moments that we all have. But it's okay to let those happen and to let other people kind of see that human side of you. So we
Yeah.
don't have to maintain perfection all the time. So thank you for sharing that.
I
All
mean,
right.
I do. Other than that one day, perfect out all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I'm sure you are. I believe it. No, but we always like to project professionalism. Maybe that's a better word than
Yes.
perfection, but you're right. We all have grown up here in the United States, at least, in a culture of professionalism and not showing emotion. I think that's very part of the work culture here in the United States. I don't know about other places, but that seems to be how things are. And yet, I think that that's changing a little bit, where people are allowed to have just a little bit more emotion. We don't want to have so much emotion that it becomes a distraction and takes away from the work, but it's going to happen from time to time, and we need to allow time and space and grace, as you put it, to allow for that. But great comments, great comments. All right, our last question. Tell us a little bit about your first job.
So, I mean, I did do, babysitting when I was younger, and I did start a tutorial business when I was in elementary school and cold called every parent in the school directory.
Wow.
And we had one tutee, we did one session, and then that was kind of that. So that was like my first job, not real job, but first paid employment was an internship that I had with ExxonMobil, and I was in college, and I did some translation work for them in a warehouse in basically the middle of the jungle of Venezuela.
Wow.
So that was a pretty random entry into the workforce. And
Wow. Translation
but
work. Very
yes,
unique. Very
yeah,
good. Well, thank you. I always love hearing. It's my favorite question. I've asked it all 3 seasons we've been on because I just love hearing kind of what people view as their first job. Some it is the babysitting and what they learn from that. Others it's the internship. Others it's the very first paid job out of college, whatever it was. I just love
yeah,
hearing what they learned and what they did because there's some really unique first job
for
experiences
sure.
out there. So it's a lot of fun. Well,
Yes.
Melanie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How
Hey.
can people find you?
So the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So if you look up Melanie Bell and the company Strategic Peace, that's probably the easiest way to find me. The other thing is I do have an Instagram account for Leaders Who Fiction at Leaders Who Fiction. I'm not terribly active on there, but we can connect, and I do post from time to time. So
Fantastic.
best places.
So once again, it's leaderswhofiction.com, and
Yes.
you are welcome to go. All the listeners and viewers, go check it out. Go see what she's doing as far as learning how to develop leadership skills from fiction. I love the concept, so go check it out.
You.
This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, go to teamengagementpodcast.com. And we also invite you to follow the podcast, either the audio version or the video version, whichever is comfortable for you. But thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.